IVM.
Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach podcast. I am Ashdin Doctor, your habit coach. And today with us for a second time, we have Akshay Pai. If you haven't heard the first episode, please go and make sure you listen to it because we deep dived into supplements. And this is something that, like I said, I'm very passionate about because I think supplements are extremely important because they add that little bit to your nutrition. And nutrition is such an important thing for our life. Today, we're going to be talking about 5 supplements, some of which you may have used, some you may have never heard of, but that we feel are something that you can explore, try out, and see how they can fit into your life. So, Akshay, welcome to the Habit Coach podcast.
Thanks, Ashton.
So, Akshay, the last time we were talking about supplements and why supplements were important. Now, which are the kinds of supplements that you feel in today's day and age we need more of than ever?
So I think this is something that we touched on the last time. Omega-3 supplements for sure. I think there's tremendous value in that for most people.
So tell us a little bit about omega supplements. Like what are they? Why are they important in our body?
So omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids are essential nutrients that we need to get from the food we eat. And what they do is they regulate the inflammation process in our body. So there's short chain omega-3 and omega-6 that are found in nuts and seeds and oils, which then get converted by our body into these longer forms, which have the effect that they do. Omega-3, the short chain omega-3, it's alpha-linolenic acid, ALA, which is found in food, is in high quantities in foods like flax and chia, gets converted by our body into EPA and DHA, which EPA has incredible anti-inflammatory properties. And DHA is an integral part of our brain, our nerves, our eyes, and even our skin to some extent. It's actually pretty crazy because what they've seen is that mothers who have higher intakes of DHA when they're pregnant and while feeding have infants with measurably better eyesight and cognition at age 4. So again, this is not to say that's the supplementation thing, but generally if their diets have more, there's a correlation to brain and eye health. But
that's the exact thing, right? Because when we talk about supplements, we're talking about nothing but the building blocks.
Absolutely.
And that's what it is. If you have enough good quality building blocks, you will have enough good quality organs and the body, which is good quality.
Absolutely.
So critical.
And but just a disclaimer there. I mean, anyone who's pregnant or feeding should be consulting their doctor before taking any sort of supplement.
Yeah,
but there's incredible value in these things. And you see that same thing in the research coming out now where supplementation with DHA at high doses, it's showing to have an effect in skin health for sure, but in things like neurological health as well. But of course, in the context of its anti-inflammatory properties, it really helps with recovery post-exercise, with joint inflammation particularly. There's a lot of benefits with omega-3 supplements that I think that is going to be even more beneficial to people living in urban centers, living relatively active lives without too much focus on their nutrition, because this is something that's really difficult to get into your diet unless you're trying really hard. Your normal sources would be flax seeds and chia, and or alternately seafood or free-range meat.
Correct.
Free-range meats aren't that accessible as of now in India.
Correct. They're not easy to find. And most of the farmed meats are packed actually with omega-6s because of the kind of corn, etc. that they're fed.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's absolutely right. And similarly with the fish. So the reason why we feel that omega-3 supplementation is incredibly important is that if you're depending entirely on your body, on your diet to get these into your body, it's a pretty precarious balancing act. So if it's through fish, it needs to be fatty fish, so that limits it to certain fish that might not, like one thing that's particularly popular in Bombay is pomfret.
It's not a fatty fish at all.
Some amount, but not as much as say mackerel,
correct,
which is much higher. And then it depends on how much you cook it, whether you're deep frying it or steaming it or grilling it. There's loss of omega-3 at varying levels through each of these. So deep frying fish gets rid of almost 80-85% of the EPA and DHA in it. So these sorts of things make it just is a little tougher to do this over time. And
so what are the supplement sources? Sorry, what are the supplement sources of these? So are fish oil tablets one source? Are omega-3s as a separate supplement one source? Are DHA one source? How should you actually break this down and choose which one?
Sure. So an omega-3 supplement, any supplement that's coming from a biological source is normally going to be from something that is rich in that particular nutrient, so that it can be efficiently extracted and put into a supplement. This generally as a rule. So with fish oil is a great source of EPA and DHA. The fish don't actually make the omega-3 themselves, but the food they eat is marine algae, and algae produce these omega-3s. So fish eat the algae. And so if the fish oil that you're using is from lower down the food chain, you'll have a higher concentration of it. Whereas the larger fish like a salmon and things like that are eating the little fish, and that's how they get their omega-3. And that's what makes them rich, and it builds up over time.
So cod liver oil is very famous, right? What are your thoughts on cod liver oil?
So cod liver oil is literally from the liver of a cod. And while it has omega-3 in it, it also has a lot of other nutrients, like vitamin D3, for example. But as a percentage of omega-3, it's not your most efficient source. It would be about 30% or less omega-3 per capsule. So if you're popping 100 mg of cod liver oil, you're getting about 30 mg of EPA plus DHA. And you want to be crossing 150 mg a day, ideally. You get vegan DHA supplements as well. They are extracted directly from the marine algae. So you're bypassing the entire fish route to make it accessible to a population that is not okay with fish. You also get omega-3 supplements made from, say, flaxseed oil. And those are good as well. But the thing to remember with flaxseed oil is that your body still needs to convert this into the form that it uses. So it's if you're supplementing anyway, it's more efficient to supplement with something that your body can utilize as is, instead of making it go through the effort and end up with losing out on a lot of the value from your supplement.
Why not just have the algae?
You could, but it's not really accessible. And of course, the quantities that you would need, right? So
lots of spirulina, like that.
Oh, yeah. So it's not just, so spirulina has some amounts, but it's not very high in DHA. It has trace amounts. So normally with these extracts, you need to concentrate it to the point that it's at the level that makes sense to supplement with. It's the same argument that why not drink a glass of milk instead of a whey protein? That the whey is coming from the milk, but it needs to be concentrated to a point where it's pure enough to be predominantly protein without all the other stuff, and concentrated enough for it to be an efficient dose.
So, when you were talking about omega-3s, it's so important, right? Because there are so many functions that the omega-3 plays in our body. And especially for my father, he's 72. I definitely make sure that he gets his omega-3s in, because that is essential for brain health, like we were talking about, right? And as you age, it's important to start getting your omega-3s, taking care of your brain, because, like we keep saying that what is the point of aging? But the idea is to age gracefully so that you don't have memory loss, you don't have those kind of issues. And supplementation can also help you with that. Thoughts on it?
Absolutely. I completely agree. The number of roles that omega-3s have in our body. So inflammation is one part. What you're talking about, neurological health, is another incredibly important thing. And it's not just about the memory, because the DHA is present in all your nerves. So one part is on aging in a way that lets you stay as healthy as possible. But the other is, even for people, in their 30s and 40s, the quality or the level of stimulation of like brain stimulation, and I don't mean this in an intellectual way, as in physical brain stimulation with all the devices that we're in front of all the time. It's a lot more than, like, the amount it's changed in the last couple of decades far exceeds what's happened over the last 100,000 years in terms of an evolutionary thing. And if you look at the brain as an organ, it consumes a disproportionate amount of calories to function. For something that contributes as little to your body in terms of mass, it consumes a lot of energy to function. And so we need to make sure that we're supplying the nutrients it needs to keep doing its job. It's not just about preventing stuff from going wrong later in life. It's also about optimizing things today. Just as an aside, on the roles that omega-3 has, there was an observation. Again, this is not conclusive proof, but there was a study that came out recently that correlated healthy omega-3 levels with better outcomes in the case of COVID infection. So like that, again, this is in the context of inflammation. The better your body is at regulating inflammation, again, not to say that inflammation is bad all the time, but the better your body is at regulating it, the better everything is going to function. Your circulatory system, your heart, your immune function, all of these things.
And like localized inflammation, good. Chronic inflammation across the body, bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's a cascading effect, because how inflammation works is our body doesn't know that, okay, there's a virus coming in from here or there's damage over there that needs to be healed. Something happens, some stuff gets released into the bloodstream and cells of your immune system flock to that place. Now, if that's happening across your body and you're just, keeping your immune system in high gear, it's going to start acting non-specifically, which is what you see in, it's actually pretty well defined in terms of skin conditions like eczema, where there's a clear correlation between the benefits of omega-3 and the severity of something like that.
Especially because probably your skin's also, omega-3 plays a big role in the cells, in the cell walls, right?
It does, yeah. Absolutely. It helps in maintain integrity, the barrier function of our skin as well.
Lovely. So what is the next supplement that we should talk about? I think protein, you touched upon it, saying that a glass of milk versus protein. Yeah. Can you explain the whole concept of whey protein? How is it made? And because there's a lot of myth around it, right?
Yeah. So whey protein is one of these, the prevalence of it today is one of these, I think, chance happenings that it was a lot of smart people doing the right thing at the right time. Because what is whey? I mean, traditionally, what is whey? Anyone who's made, curd, dahi at home, there's a little bit of watery stuff at the top that's essentially whey. Or if you're making paneer at home. So what is milk? Milk is it's a mixture of water and proteins, essentially. At chemically speaking, it's a bunch of proteins emulsified with water. Now, there's two broad families of proteins in milk. One are called casein proteins, and the other are your whey proteins. And these are families. So within this, there's different specific proteins, but broadly there's wheys and there's casein. When you make cheese, any kind of cheese, whether it's a paneer or a mozzarella or whatever, what you're basically doing is taking the casein proteins out of that emulsion. So you do that either by adding acid, like we do with paneer, where you add some lime juice or some vinegar or something like that, and you're changing the pH, which causes the caseins to come out of solution. And then you take that and do whatever you want with it from a diet standpoint. But your whey proteins are still in solution. And that water, the water that's left behind is basically whey protein suspended in water. Now, the hassle is that, now next question would be, why not just drink that? But the issue is that whey proteins make up less than 10% of that solution. So for this to be efficient, what you want to do is remove all the stuff you don't want, because what the other stuff that's left in the solution is basically lactose. So you want to remove all that stuff and concentrate the protein to a point where you aren't consuming a ridiculous amount of it. So just broadly, and I tried to do this at the outset before starting Nutrova, where I'd gone to a cheese manufacturer and requested them to give me some whey and try to purify it. You need approximately somewhere between 600 and 1,000 liters of whey to get 1 kilo of whey protein isolate. Like, that's the order of magnitude.
That's crazy, right? Imagine drinking that much. Not possible.
Yeah. So it's ridiculous. It makes no sense but once the technology gets to a point where you can extract just the protein, what you're basically doing is concentrating it. Like how you would boil down something to concentrate the salts in it or the sugars in it. Similar concept. You just keep removing the liquid out till what you're left with is a really concentrated collection of proteins. So that's basically how whey protein is made. So it's not that it's some synthetic thing that's going to wreck your kidneys or your liver or something like that. It's proteins that are found in milk. And it's just an efficient way. And if you think about the industry as a whole, it actually solves the problem for cheesemakers because they don't have to dump all this liquid with everything that they make. So a lot of dairy companies have invested in this capacity as well. So milk to cheese, cheese to whey protein. So with the wastage. So
there are no chemicals that go into making the whey protein. Is it a physical process or is it a chemical process from extracting the protein out of the whey?
So the first step is getting the cheese out of the milk. I mean, do you look at cheese production as a chemical process or not? I mean, that's where it would be, because you're essentially adding an enzyme to it, a rennet, which is they have recombinant vegetarian ones as well, but traditionally rennet came from the stomach of cattle, and that causes it to curdle. If in the case of paneer, you're adding an acid, which is either lemon juice or vinegar, which is acetic acid. And these are normal foods, but they're also standalone chemicals. So
once you have the whey, what do you do?
So then you're just concentrating. Then you're using, it's more of a physical process than a chemical one, where you're playing around with the same way the acid got the caseins out. If you play around with the pH, you can get to a point where the whey also comes out. There's different technologies there, but it's more of a physical process. You're not really adding anything to it.
Okay. So when people say that wheys are all chemical wheys, and it's not necessary to think about whey as a chemical ingredient. Okay?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So ricotta cheese is a whey-based cheese.
Okay.
So the protein in those kinds of... So they make cheeses out of whey as well. It's just really tedious and low yield. So this would be as chemical as that is. And, just to put it into context, I know this is a bit of an oversimplification, but if you think that cheese is chemical, then sure, okay. But it's essentially the same process.
Yeah. Now, whenever I tell people about cheese and they say, you cannot take away my cheese. So clearly, people do not think cheese is a chemical process, because we're like, how dare you even say anything bad about my cheese? We're so passionate about cheese we are. Okay. So whey protein is extracted that way. Now, obviously, whey is not vegan, right? We have a whole slew of vegan proteins as well. What are vegan proteins?
So when we think about proteins, it's important to understand that the proteins are made up of these building blocks called amino acids. And amino acids, there's 20, generally speaking. There's variants also which take it up to 23, 24, but there's 20 basic amino acids that our body needs. 9 of these we can't make. And we need to get these 9 from the body. In addition to these 9, there's certain of the remaining 11 that are conditionally essential, which means that if there's something wrong, we can't make those either. Wrong could be we could be exercising too much, and there might be too much of a demand, so we need to get that from our diet as well. And a balanced diet normally contains all of these amino acids. What makes whey protein a great supplement is it contains all the essential amino acids in really high proportions. So it's an easy, efficient way to get everything. And added to that, whey is really easily broken down by our body. And so its bioavailability is high. Now, when we talk about vegan proteins, so technically you can take protein out of any food. You can take it out of rice, you can take it out of dal. Anything that has protein, you can concentrate. It's the same principle as milk. But with vegan proteins, what tends to happen is there's normally, with vegan sources of protein, there's normally one amino acid out of these 9 essential ones that is low. It's either entirely missing or it's low, at least one. Which is why, from an evolutionary standpoint, the Indian diet always couples grains with dals and legumes, with pulses. Because the one amino acid that's missing in a dal is present in a roti. And so if you're taking both together, you're getting all the amino acids. So with vegan proteins, they're basically extracting these proteins from these sources. And they tend to be low. It doesn't mean it's zero, but they tend to be low in at least one amino acid, which is why you see products with a blend of rice protein, pea protein, and all these things. So, the only thing is this is again, as speaking as a product guy, it's a little difficult to flavor vegan proteins. But apart from that, as long as you're conscious of the fact that you would need to either, like if it's a pea protein, for example, it will definitely help out to supplement a vegan diet with that. But being conscious of the fact that it can't be a complete substitute for food, because you need to get that balance coming by way of other sources of protein, because that one amino acid may not be there.
Because they have to supplement, right? They have to be on top of whatever else you're having. So making sure that you're having your food is absolutely important. Whether you're vegetarian, non-vegetarian, vegan, irrelevant. You have to get your sources of food first and make sure that you're getting the max out of that. then you have the protein that comes on as the top to just make sure that you're getting enough of it. And and I think vegetarians, vegans especially, need a lot more protein. They're just not getting enough, especially if they are doing things like, I have 4 katoris of dal. Yeah, but you're not having the rice with it. So if you're not having the rice with the dal, you're not getting your protein. You're not getting your full, the essential proteins that you're talking about, essential amino acids. So it's important to get that that complete range of proteins, which is why maybe supplementing with a vegan protein makes a lot of sense for vegans especially.
Yeah, and another thing to think about in the context of proteins is the individual specific need. When does someone even think about how much protein they're having? It's either when they're trying to put on muscle or trying to get into shape, or they've realized that their diet is like they're doing something like dramatically wrong, which would normally mean they're leaning towards high blood sugar or putting on a lot of weight. In each of those situations, if it's on the one extreme where there's an increased demand on account of their physical training, they need to up their protein intake, which they can do through their food. You can just eat, instead of 4 bowls of dal, have 8 bowls of dal. But that comes with a cost. A, it's impractical. But B, dal is also coming with starch.
Correct.
Which is something that,
dals are more carbs than protein.
Yeah, and that's something that needs to be looked at in context. So if you're okay with that and that suits your health goals, great. By all means, get the dal, get the extra 4 bowls of dal, because that's also going to give you minerals, etc., etc. For someone that is trying to increase protein without increasing overall calories or without increasing overall carbohydrate intake, that's when protein supplements really add value, particularly for vegetarians, because vegetarians and vegans more so, because there's also the question of bioavailability. The proteins so there's this measure called the biological value of a protein, where it's compared to an ideal of 1 or 100%. It's easier to think about it that way. So whey protein has a biological value of 1, which means that it's very well absorbed and it has all your amino acids, all the essential amino acids. Pea protein has a biological value of 0.93. So just relatively speaking, that's a function of having less of one particular amino acid and being a little harder to absorb. Not to say that it's not comparable, but if you think about that in terms of food, the same thing applies to animal-derived proteins and plant-derived proteins. The biological value of plant-derived proteins is going to be marginally lower. So if you have a specific goal that involves you getting in more protein, a vegan protein supplement might be a more efficient way to approach that. And again, the logic is the same. There's no chemicals being added to it. It's the same thing where you're taking the protein out of the food, not adding something to the food to make the protein.
Okay. So it's still not a chemically kind of a reaction that's taking place?
Absolutely not.
How should people choose a vegan protein? Like, should they choose a pure pea protein? Should they choose a blend of things? What is a good way of looking at vegan proteins?
So,
like, apart from the flavor, I completely agree with you. Yeah. Like, it's really, really hard to get the taste right.
Yes. So we put a vegan protein out in the market about 5 years ago. And we were working on it a year before that, where we just couldn't flavor it without adding a ton of artificial sweeteners to it. And then we started thinking through the problem about who's actually going to use it. And what we found was, while it's hard to flavor it like a traditional protein supplement, pea protein mixes brilliantly with Indian foods. I mean, you mix it into a roti, you don't know it's there. You mix it into a dal, you don't know it's there. And we just figured that if, for vegans who are conscious of what they're eating, this is a nice way to top up the intake. And so pea protein for us works really well in terms of a compliance perspective, where it's easy for someone to incorporate it into their lives regularly. And so we prefer an unflavored pea protein. But if this is going to be the primary source of protein for someone, and then not incorporating it into the foods they eat, something that contains a mix of proteins, like a rice and a pea, might be a little more balanced. So, yeah, we have a bias towards pea protein, obviously. I mean, full disclosure, we have a product that's an unflavored pea protein. But from a balanced perspective, if this is all that they are depending on, and they're like, okay, I'm not changing anything about my diet, but I'm going to take a supplement, then something that has a collection of vegan proteins in it would probably be a little more helpful. But again, the the incremental benefit is not all that much, because in 20 grams of pea protein versus 20 grams of a blend, your variance is going to be on half a gram of a particular amino acid. It's not going to be some dramatic change. And if you're eating other foods, which you should be, that's going to get covered.
Understood. Okay, great. Before going ahead, we'll take a quick break.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week, Sia Tires and TheWholeTruthFoods.com. Thank you for your support. We did a bunch of cock and bulls this week. We had guests like Ayushi Amin and Puneet Mania for that. Besides that, Vasanti Hariprakash was on, as well as Jay Alani, a paranormal investigator. Really, really great week on Cyrus Says. Do check it out. Tune into This Round Is On Me for an episode recorded from Gulmarg featuring one of India's professional alpine skiers, Arif Khan, who's looking forward to representing India at the Beijing Olympics. On The Habit Coach, Ashdin has a chat with Kunal Rajput, a popular fitness trainer who recently completed 7 rounds of his Unlock workout series. The reunified, simplified gang of Tony, Naren, Chuck, and Shrikant discussed NFTs on the latest episode. On The Millennial Athlete, Tanvi and Shlok looked back at all the England championships of the year so far and discussed the interesting highlights of the same. Also on Thale Harate, our Kannada podcast, Ganesh spoke to Archana Shyam of Antharanga Theatre in the latest episode. And on Kadai podcast, our Tamil show, Kavita Jiva shed light in another story about the bravery and excellence in the governance of the Pallava dynasty. And with that, let's get you back to your show.
And we are back. Now let's talk about something else that, again, vegans find it hard to get, or it's impossible to get maybe for them, which is collagen, right? Collagen is such an important nutrient that we need to have. Tell us a little bit about collagen.
Right. So collagen is a really, really interesting protein. 60% of the protein in our body is collagen. And it makes up a large proportion of our skin. It's in our joints. And what's really interesting that it also lines our gut. So collagen serves to give our body structure. And in many places like the gut and the skin, it forms sort of a biological barrier to external things. In our gut, the food we eat is essentially the external environment. And our skin,
it's like a foreign object going into us.
Absolutely. And collagen in our skin, it's like this barrier between all the pollution and UV radiation and all that, and the insides of our body. So collagen is incredibly important. And like we touched on in the previous conversation we had, is formed by our body using the amino acids from the food we eat and vitamin C. Now, what happens with collagen production is that it slows down as we age. The older we get, the longer it takes us for our body to make collagen. And what was found out is that if you take collagen peptides, which are basically broken down pieces of collagen, broken down to a very specific size, they aren't digested further. So, like we mentioned for the whey protein, where whey protein is digested really easily, if you have collagen peptides of a particular size, they're not digested further, they're absorbed as it is. And they go into your bloodstream and actually deposit in the formation of new collagen. And there was a really cool study they did to show this. It was where they put like tags on the amino acids in the collagen and found the intact peptides incorporated into the skin.
So no change had taken place to them.
Yeah, but these
just
are really
directly
tiny.
Absorbed and put in. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, so these are really tiny. So these are 2 and 3 amino acid long. Now, the thing with collagen is it's not a complete protein. It's missing some of the essential amino acids. So using just collagen as your source of protein makes no sense from a muscle building perspective. But if your goal is to improve collagen formation and the overall health of the collagen in your body, whether it's for your skin, for your joints, for your gut, whatever it is, getting these collagen peptides is really important because it's a very unique chain. It's these very specific amino acids, glycine, proline, and hydroxyproline. And hydroxyproline is something your body has to make. You're not going to get it in too many foods. And these particular peptides in different permutations and combinations of 2 and 3 amino acid length are absorbed whole. So that's a really interesting thing about collagen. And, a lot of the issues that you see coming up as you age, the easiest to understand is wrinkles. Why do wrinkles form? Your skin, like I said, is predominantly collagen. And There's this every day that we're out in the sun, whatever we are doing, there is some damage happening on a cellular level. We get to a stage, it varies from person to person. I mean, you'll see 60-year-olds with less wrinkles than a 30-year-old sometimes, but it varies a lot on your lifestyle and things like smoking, etc. Habits that might accelerate cellular aging. But that microscopic damage builds up over time. And if you think about collagen as, think of it as a brick wall. Like if the bricks are being damaged slowly, and you aren't replacing it with a new brick every time, eventually you're going to have a gap in that wall. And because our ability to make collagen is slowing down, we can't repair the collagen being damaged as quickly. And that over time leads to a wrinkle. So now think about a similar thing happening in the context of our joints or our gut. Now, I would imagine that a lot of the people that would fit into our demographic would drink fairly regularly. And alcohol at the end of the day is I want to use the word corrosive because that sounds extreme, but it does have an effect on the gut. So do certain kinds of foods, so do certain lifestyle habits, but there's damage happening to your gut over time. Now, it's not going to happen overnight, but you see a lot of people in their 30s and 40s suddenly having symptoms of, say, an IBS or issues with digestion in general. And not to say that it is IBS, but there is a correlation between collagen and digestive health as well. Again, not to say that collagen is going to cure any of those diseases, but damaged the epithelial barrier in your gut, the damage to that can be addressed with collagen supplementation as well.
Whatever little you can do, at least do that.
Yeah. And there's all of these tremendous benefits. And the crazy thing is that they're not new, because bone broth, stocks, soups, like, a basic chicken soup. So what is collagen? So the collagen that's present in us, it's actually, the interesting thing about collagen is it's present in every vertebrate. So birds, any mammal, even like anything with a backbone essentially has collagen. From the food we eat, if you think about a chicken soup, what we're basically doing is where the collagen is found in the bones. So you're cooking it long enough for the collagen to break down into collagen peptides. And the longer you cook it, the more it breaks down. But that's very non-specific. You can't say that, okay, I'm going to cook this chicken for 1.5 hours and I'm going to have collagen peptides of 3,000 to 5,000 Dalton size. You can't do that. And if you could, please tell us how, because we would love to figure that out. So what happens with collagen peptides that we use as supplements is it's broken down the collagen from these sources is broken down in a very controlled way. And it's broken down to that particular size that is absorbed directly. And that's what gives you the benefits. So we've known historically that bone broths are good for your gut, they're good for your skin, they're good for your joints. But this is taking that one step further. I'm taking what is good from the bone broths and putting it in a dose that is measurable accurately, so that you know that, okay, I need to take so much for these benefits to happen to me.
What is the best way of taking collagen as a supplement?
So,
or when? Is there a timing for it?
So if you're taking it there's a very, very marginal benefit to taking it at night or late in the day, because a lot of the recovery in our body happens when we're sleeping. So there's a marginal benefit to that for sure. But what's important is that you take it every day. Because if you're not taking it on a daily basis, the benefits aren't as compounded, because you want to maintain levels of collagen peptides in your body for an extended period of time, so that your body can draw on those peptides when it needs to repair something. So, but again, as long as you're taking it every day, the difference between taking it at different times is marginal at best.
Okay. So taking collagen, making sure that you're regular on it is when you're going to see the best results. It is not something that you need to, it's not one of those things saying that you take it for a while and then you stop and you see how you're feeling, because you're not going to see that change taking place dramatically, right? It takes a while for these changes to start taking place.
Yeah. So we did this study on the collagen product we have. So what we did was, for 30 days, we gave a group of people a placebo and measured their skin using instruments, 3D imaging, and a doctor actually checking them. before the placebo. Then after 30 days of the placebo, they were checked again. Then they were given the product for another 60 days and they were checked at 30 and 60 days. And what we saw was that certain changes started at day 30. So a reduction in wrinkle width, improvements in skin texture, decrease in pore size, pore volume rather. These things started at day 30, but by day 60, you started seeing changes in pigmentation, in dark circles, all of that.
Wow.
So it's compounded over time.
So I think sticking to these is important. Akshay, I loved our conversation on these 3 supplements. It's so important to have these conversations because these are things that there is so much myth around, right? Like, should we be taking this? Should we not be taking this? And demystifying it is absolutely important.
Yeah.
So Akshay, thank you so much for coming and discussing these supplements with us. How can people find out more about, what you're doing, the fantastic company that you've built, and, ask you questions about these things?
So people can reach out to us on social media. It's at Nutrova on Instagram. And all the research that we've done, all the information on our products, everything's on our website. That's nutrova.com. And we'd love to answer any questions that people may have. Feel free to reach out to us. And in addition to the products, what we genuinely believe is we need to get information out there to get people more aware. And I'm really grateful that there's platforms like this where people actually do that.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much, Akshay. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashdin.
So start these habits and share with us your progress using the hashtag #TheHabitCoach. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am Ashdin Doc on Twitter and Instagram. You can find lots more information on my website, awesome180.com, or check out different content on my YouTube channel called AWESOME180. That's Awesome180.
Come learn and experience the ABCDs of being queer with me, Shunetro,
and me, Farhad,
on our show, Gay BCD.
The two of us take you through our stories and experiences of being gay men in the city of Mumbai and have candid
and sometimes downright scandalous
conversations about sexuality, gay culture, and everything in between.
Catch new episodes of Gay BCD every Tuesday on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get all your podcasts from.
2020 is a difficult year. A global pandemic, protests, elections, recessions. You get the picture. What we need is a space where we can have nuanced discussions about global affairs and foreign policy. That's where I come in. My name is Hamsini Hariharan and I host the States of Anarchy podcast. Every second Tuesday, I speak to experts in the field of international relations to make a little more sense of the world. So join me on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you're listening to me right now.